All right, today we are going to talk about the city-state of Athens in ancient Greece. Now, it is an extremely important city because a lot of cool stuff came from this city. And we're going to talk about, once again, because probably by this time you guys should already know what's going on with the mythology behind how this city was founded. But, of course, it's mythology, so it's not really real. But we'll discuss that a little bit. And this, if you don't know by now, this is the third time that you've heard it. You should be able to do it in your sleep. I mean, come on, guys. Come on. All right. So maybe I'll quiz you because this is ridiculous if you don't know it by now. But anyway, we're going to start talking about Athens and how great of a city it was and its contribution to our daily lives right here, not just ancient Greece, but our lives today. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Let's talk once again about the founding of Athens according to the Greek mythology. Now, as we've talked about before, it had to do with Athena and Poseidon. Of course, Athena, goddess of wisdom and war. Poseidon, the god of the sea and earthquakes. Okay? So they were both fighting over the naming of the greatest town in all of Greece. And they both thought that it should be named after one of them. Okay? So instead of them fighting, duking it out, as gods like to do, they came to an agreement about having a contest and letting the people who lived there choose who it should be named after. So they were both going to give gifts to those people, and those people would judge which one gave the best gift. That's who we'll name it after. So Poseidon went first, and he came down and took his trident, which is that pointy three-pronged thing you see in the picture, came down, slammed it into the ground, and up bubbled this stream, this saltwater stream. And so quickly it turned from just a little geyser, a little stream, into a huge river that went all the way to the Mediterranean Sea. Now Poseidon thought, well, this would give Athens access to the sea so they could become rich and powerful through trade. And as we talked about before, the Athenians didn't really have anything to trade. So you know how trading works. I give you something, you give me something. Well, if I have nothing, you're not going to give me anything. That's how it works. So he didn't really think it out. And the people of the city were not really impressed. So Athena, she came down, and knowing that she is the goddess of wisdom, she's a pretty smart lady. So what she gave them was the olive tree as her gift. And of course the olive tree has olives, and it made them rich so that they could trade with other civilizations that did not have these things because it was something that was rare. It didn't grow anywhere, just anywhere in the ancient world. Greece was the place where it grew the most, and people wanted it. So they were able to trade for the things that they needed, because remember, the geography of Greece is very rocky, very hilly, a lot of rocky soil, hard to grow stuff like grain and other things that the Egyptians and the Mesopotamians were able to grow in their civilizations. So they were able to trade with those two civilizations to get some of the things they needed. Now, they didn't just trade with those two. They traded with other civilizations, smaller civilizations we won't talk about. They weren't really major civilizations, but that's how they were able to get rich and powerful. So the people thought, hey, that's a pretty good idea. We're going to name the city after Athena, which came Athens. Okay? And this is where Athens is if you go to Google Earth. Now, as you can probably see, it is kind of on the tip of the mainland of Greece. It's not on an island, but it's actually on the tip of the mainland of Greece. All right, now let me move myself out of the way here. Didn't work out real well, but that's okay. Now, Athens was considered to be where all the smart people in Greece were, the intellectual center. The word intellectual means smart. So that's where the smarts came from, okay? So it was the intellectual center of Greece. If Athenians, which is what they called themselves because they were from Athens, kind of like we're Americans because we're from the United States of America, they called themselves Athenians. They focused more on philosophy. Now, philosophy is the way to think about things that are happening in nature and in the world and how things are and why they are and things like that, kind of like the beginning of science. And they were doing philosophy and learning more than building a strong army. Now, just because they didn't have a strong army didn't mean that they were just easily run over. They actually had one of the most powerful navies in all of the ancient world, though. So they actually, if you got them on land, they were okay. They battled on land. They were able to hold their own. They weren't great. They weren't dominant. But if you got them in the sea, you're probably going to lose because they had an awesome navy. And we'll talk more about that because we'll talk about some battles and things like that the Greeks had to go through to defeat some very powerful enemies. And whenever they had to do it on the water, the Athenians were the ones that they brought in. Now, most men worked in the fields or even used pottery or stoneworking shops. And they did a lot of statuary, which statuary is like statues, things like that. And as you can see from the picture, there was a lot of that stuff there. And a lot of their buildings were made of stone. So if you were building with stone and you be able to use things with stone, build things out of stone, you're probably pretty important in the Greek society. Now, how was education in Athens? Because remember, I just said that it was very important in Athens. Well, the purpose of Athenian education was to produce thinkers, people that were well-trained in the arts, in the sciences, people prepared for peace and war. If you have a bunch of soldiers that's all they do, and there's not a lot of wars, they're just kind of sitting around, kind of picking their nose, doing things like that. So the Athenians, when they went to school, they studied a lot of the same stuff that you guys do. Reading, grammar, worked on poetry. We don't work on poetry a whole lot. We work on it, but not a whole lot. History, math, and music. And young Athenian boys were tutored at home until the age of 6 or 7, where here, around the age of 5, you go to kindergarten, so it wasn't too far off. And then they were sent to neighborhood schools for primary education until they were about 14, so about 2 years after what you guys are now. Usually they were private schools where you actually had to pay to go. Not like now we have a free public education system to where it doesn't really cost you anything. There's no tuition. You don't have to write a check. Your parents don't have to write a check for you to go here. You can go. But the tuition cost, the money to go to these private schools, were pretty low, even though most poor Athenians could afford to send their boys for at least a couple of years. So everybody got to go to school, even though sometimes you had to pay for it. Now, what they kind of focused on is the whole Athenian society is that they wanted people to get together and they wanted to talk about the different things that were going on with the city-state. And look, it looks like they've got ancient laptops. Not really. It was just kind of an early tablet where they were writing on things, no computers or anything like that. But they wanted them to be able to think logically and be good public speakers. Get up in front of people and speak. And I know that freaks some of you guys out, but that's okay. The older boys were also taught how to do military type activities such as running, boxing, wrestling, things like that. That was part of going to school. All Athenian boys were expected to read heavily, though. They're not supposed to be just brute guys that were able to wrestle and punch you in the face for boxing. They had to do a lot of reading. In fact, Homer's The Iliad and the Odyssey were mandatory. You had to read those in Athenian elementary schools. And I'm going to show you the Iliad and the Odyssey, and it's not easy to read. The boys were also taught how to play the lyre, how to sing, how to do math, which they called arithmetic. And the emphasis on their education was to have somebody that was well-rounded, being able to do whatever was asked of them, whether it was go to war or be part of the government or be able to speak in public. They wanted everybody to be able to do that. Okay. All right. Now, at the age of 14, poorer boys usually stopped going to school and became apprenticeships at trade. They actually were trained to do other things. If your family could afford you to continue to go to school, you went for 4 more years, and at age 18, regardless of if you were rich or poor, you were required to go into the military for 2 years. And then after that, you could do whatever you wanted to. If you wanted to become a soldier, great. If you wanted to be an artist, great. If you wanted to be a singer, great. You could do whatever you wanted to. Okay? There were no colleges until about 390 BC when a guy named Aristotle began doing academies for higher learning, the first colleges. Now, unfortunately, even though my battery's about to die, oh no, Athenian girls were not officially schooled. Sorry, gals. Sorry, ladies. They were educated by their mothers, and they learned more about raising kids, weaving cloth, how to cook, managing households, and other items that helped them become good wives and mothers. Okay?
This is Sparta!
And that's what we're going to talk about next time, guys. All right. This will end for that, and then we'll talk about Sparta and the 300 and all that.